A traveler strolling through Sarajevo will most likely come across the Iranian Cultural Center located just meters away from the Eternal Flame, a monument erected by the communist Yugoslav government to commemorate fallen World War II partisan fighters. A traveler with more attention to detail will most likely notice a number of Iranian institutes, schools, and non-governmental organizations throughout the country. But why would Iran be interested in gaining influence in a distant Balkan country in the first place? During the Cold War, Yugoslav dictator Josip Broz Tito maintained close relations with the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, exchanging a number of high-profile state visits. Trade and military cooperation flourished. Bilateral relations were not severed despite the change of government in Iran following the Islamic Revolution in 1979 and the death of Tito in 1980. In fact, the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Sayyid Ali Khamenei, visited Belgrade in 1989, just 2 years before Yugoslavia began disintegrating. However, today's story of Iranian influence in Bosnia and Herzegovina is solely linked to the 1990s war. The breakup of Yugoslavia and the ensuing Serbian genocide of Bosniak Muslims caught the government in Sarajevo off guard. It had to think of ways of arming itself and providing for its population before even establishing diplomatic relations with the outside world. Since Bosnia was under an arms embargo and Serbia possessed some of the largest stocks of weapons in Eastern Europe, the significant imbalance of power made Bosnians look elsewhere for support. Western European states viewed all parties to the conflict as equally responsible and shied away from supporting Bosniak Muslims. Hence, the country's leadership turned to Gulf Arab countries, Turkey, Malaysia, Pakistan, Egypt, and Iran. Bosnia's first democratically elected president, Alija Izetbegović, gained immense respect and popularity in Iran. Very soon afterwards, the Iranian government began sending weapons, food, medicine, and even military instructors to Bosnia. Amjad Javad was one of the first Iranians to arrive in Bosnia as a relief worker.
Ja sam tada imao 21 godinu kad sam došao.
I was 21 years old when I arrived to Bosnia and Herzegovina. As you may know, when Yugoslavia disintegrated and the war of aggression against Bosnia began, all world's media were reporting on the horrors of war, on the destruction, killings, pillaging and massacres. It was a very unjust war, very unjust. And it was a very specific war. In conventional wars, you have clearly defined war zones. In the case of Bosnia, there was no such thing. There were war zones and peace zones everywhere. It was really a very specific and unconventional war. We in Iran were following news as they unfolded, and I will not exaggerate if I say that 99% of Iranians wanted to go to Bosnia and help, especially the youth, especially the men. They cried like little children as they watched events unfold in Bosnia. Those were very ugly scenes of killings and massacres. However, there were limitations and only certain organizations could facilitate travel to Bosnia. Our leader, Sayyid Ali Khamenei, who had visited Yugoslavia in the late 90s, had very clear picture of the situation Bosnian Muslims were in. He was in Sarajevo and know of the situation. He then ordered all, including the president, the parliament, the Ministry of Defense and the media, to form a task group that would efficiently coordinate support for the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Otpor i sektor koji se bavi medijom organizovali su jedan štab koji je brinio za organizacije što prije, što najefikasnije, što na adekvatniji način pomažu naroda Bosne i Hercegovine.
Amjad today works as the deputy director of the Persian Bosnian College, a high school founded back in 1999 and funded partially by the Iranian government. The school follows a local Bosnian curriculum but also teaches Iranian history, culture, and language. These sort of interactions between Bosnians and Iranians, though small, went in both directions. After the end of the war in 1995, Iranian relief workers and military advisors began encouraging local Bosniak Muslims to pursue their studies in Tehran. Quite a few found such an invitation rather appealing, as they were eager to escape the destruction and desperation that every war brings. Nihat Chamjic was one of the first Bosniak Muslims to receive an Iranian government scholarship and study in Iran. Today, he works as a Persian language translator in Sarajevo. 25 years have passed since he first traveled to Iran, but he still fondly remembers the unmatched public support for Bosnia when he first arrived in Tehran.
Moram biti iskren, doživjeli smo jedno veliko oduševljenje po dolasku.
I must be honest and say that we experienced a huge amount of excitement upon our arrival to Iran. We received a really fantastic reception from the Iranian people. It was amazing. Bosnia was very much present as a news story in the Iranian media. It was always a top story. Such an affection towards us was palpable in our everyday contacts with the Iranian people. Such a warm welcome and the hospitality that we experienced made our stay far more comfortable, and we were in a way more privileged than other students. That of course does not mean that our living conditions were ideal. We had numerous problems, primarily financial problems. We also had certain problems with our accommodation and restrictions regarding the courses we wanted to study, as we were not allowed to enroll on certain undergraduate programs. However, all in all, we were welcomed very warmly by the highest authorities in Iran.
Sam prijem Irana i također iranski zvaničnik je bio na visokom nivou.
Iran's post-1979 constitution obliges the state to pursue Islamic unity and defend oppressed Muslims around the world. As a means of achieving this goal, Iran utilized its Shia character as the basis for its soft power projection and galvanized support among oppressed Muslim minorities. During their visits to Bosnia and Herzegovina, Iranian officials often pointed to the joint experiences of oppression and persecution faced both by Iranians and Bosniak Muslims, cleverly omitting the sectarian divide but openly suggesting that only an Islamic revolution would awaken Muslims and protect them from further persecution. The Iranian state amplified such messaging via its Sahar TV Bosnian language program broadcasted from their Tehran studios, via its Arab radio station and its Bosnian language program, as well as pro-Iranian academic institutions such as the Ibn Sina Institute and the Mullah Sadra Foundation. Geopolitics closely intertwined with Islamic theology, and some of these pro-Iranian institutions openly challenged the prevailing Sunni Hanafi school of Islam in Bosnia by translating, publishing, and distributing works on Shia theology. This caused some confusion among Bosniak Muslims who were not too familiar with how divergent opinions coming from Shia and Sunni scholars may impact their everyday lived Islam. For a number of years, the Mullah Sadra Foundation even issued fatwas according to Shia interpretations of Islam, resulting in strong reactions from Bosniak Muslim scholars. The situation became so serious that the Grand Mufti of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Hussein Kavazovic, strongly rebuked the Mullah Sadra Foundation in 2014 following an article they published on their website questioning the early codification of the Quran. For the purposes of this film, we contacted the Mullah Sadra Foundation and the Ibn Sina Institute with interview requests, but received no response. Senada Tahirovic is the editor-in-chief of the Islamic community's newspaper Preporod. She believes that such attempts at Shia proselytizing gained only marginal followers and never made it to the mainstream.
Poslije agresije postojale su u javnosti.
After the wartime aggression on Bosnia and Herzegovina, there were some rather sporadic analyses, commentaries, and even articles about Shia proselytizing, which aroused fear and suspicion among Bosnian Muslims. Such claims have, as far as I know, not been subject to deeper research or analyses. Even if such claims were founded, they could have been very marginal. As I said before, and it is worth reiterating, the Muslim community in Bosnia and Herzegovina is very homogeneous. Muslims here are Sunnis, very homogeneous, and they organize their religious life in an institutionalized manner, through the Islamic community in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which in turn strives hard to preserve such a hierarchy and such a structure when faced with foreign influences.
Vrlo artikulisano, vrlo jasno, tu strukturu ili takvu strukturu pokušava
including influences coming from Iran or from Iranian institutions in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
I utjecaje koji se mogu vidjeti ili koji se mogu prepoznati iz Irana ili nekih iranskih organizacija u Bosni i Hercegovini.
Despite the diversified approach to expanding its soft power influence in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Iranian state has not managed to forge close ties with the government of Bosnia. Diplomatic visits of any kind are extremely rare, with the last official visit by an Iranian head of state to Sarajevo being in 2005. There is no military cooperation between the two countries, as Bosnia now closely cooperates with NATO and aspires to join the Western military alliance in the near future. Bilateral trade is low, and Iran is not even among the country's top 20 trade partners. Academic exchange programs are available only for a small number of Bosnian students studying Persian language, culture, or Islamic philosophy. Professor Ahmed Zildjić believes there are numerous points of convergence between Bosniak Muslims and Iran, even dating back to the Ottoman period, that facilitate closer cultural and religious communication.
Želim da kažem da postoji jedan okvir.
I would like to say that there exists a framework of interest when it comes to Iran and its culture, art and literature, and this region, the Balkans. Such cultural exchange cannot only be reduced to Iran's contact with Bosniak Muslims. We in fact know that the Orient as a theme is very much present in Serbian and Croatian literature. There was a great interest in Persian poetry and for the works of Omer Khayyam and Hafez Shirazi. And there are numerous Balkan authors such as Jovan Jovanović Zmaj. Now, moving on to more recent times, the war created specific conditions and paved the way for broader cooperation between Iran and Bosnia and Herzegovina. I can openly say that such cooperation reached its peak during that period.
To je jedan okvir i za saradnju između Irana i Republike Bosne i Hercegovine i mogu da kažem da je u tom periodu ta saradnja bila na jednom vrhuncu, da kažem.
In the post-war years, Iran enjoyed great esteem among the Bosniak Muslim population due to the significant aid it provided. In turn, the Iranian government attempted to use such a friendly atmosphere to disseminate its ideology. However, under significant American pressure, the Bosnian government, led by President Alija Izetbegović, expelled all Iranian Revolutionary Guard advisors and Arab foreign fighters out of the country. Such a move did not go down too well in Tehran and was interpreted as a sign of ungratefulness. Bosniak Muslims, in turn, turned towards the European Union for trade, education, and development. Bosniak Muslim students still prefer to study in Germany, Austria, Italy, the Netherlands, and the UK. And those few that do graduate from Iranian universities often have trouble in the job market. Bosnian NGOs have found it far more fruitful to cooperate with European and American institutions than Iranian ones due to their larger budgets and greater resources. The presence Iran had in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the war was a window opportunity provided by the absence of Western states to aid Bosnia's beleaguered Muslims. Iran's investment might have been significant, but its harvest was poor.